obviously this looks a little different today, right? It's not just me hanging out behind my desk. I have my first male guest on. Yes, ladies, here we are. And so I had the honor of meeting this amazing gentleman through a speakers group that I have been with for a short period of time. And I was on his podcast last week, which I shared with you. And this is Dr. Dan Franz. And he is an amazing psychologist and counselor, and all about finding meaning in your life when you're feeling like, why am I doing this? Dr. Dan has all the answers. So, Dr. Dan, tell us all the answers.
All the answers. You know what? I think we all have the answers within us. I just have the honor of helping people find them, the bearing witness to this opportunity to discover meaning.
Yes, that is so true. Everything that we have, and I say this to all my peeps, is already in you. God put it in you when he knit you together.
Absolutely.
So
it's there.
It's in there.
I one of my former professors gave this beautiful image of my job. Our role is the troubled soul is like an anchor that's been drugged through the muck and is just covered with dirt and grime and muck. And our job is to help clean it off, shine that anchor up, and that anchor of meaning, and to find all the goodness that's there in the human soul, in the human spirit.
That's really an interesting, let's start right there. So Brene Brown said something in one of her books, and probably in all of her books, but one of the things that she said is that she really believes, and I believe this too, and I don't know if it's right or wrong, but it's one of my core beliefs, that I really feel like people are inherently good.
I think to do the work we do, you have to think that. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I really think that, I don't think anybody gets up in the morning and says, you know what, that's it. I'm going to do something horrible today or evil today. I think that people get up and go like, oh gosh, how am I going to face the day? But I don't really think that people get up and think I don't think that most people, I mean, we know that there are.
I was going to clarify that as well. I mean, we know there is true evil in the world, but I don't think people start out as evil, right? We are all born inherently good. And unfortunately, some people have poor nutrition, poor spiritual nutrition, poor mental, emotional nutrition, and become corrupted. That at some point later in their life, maybe they do wake up that way, but not as babies or children, or even, I think all teenagers are good. Sometimes they just have difficult environments.
Oh, teenagers. Yeah, we could.
There's a whole podcast.
That's a whole podcast. Teenage girls, know anything about that, Dr. Dan?
Unfortunately, I don't. I have two of my own, and I know nothing about them. So I apparently do everything wrong on a regular, daily basis. So no, I don't know anything, and I'm told that often.
Oh, come on, you're the dad. You're like daddy's little girl. Like my ex-husband can do no wrong, virtually no wrong.
I think we're in a stage where there's a need for a lot of accountability for an 18 and 20-year-old, and
it's hard.
Yeah, that's usually dad's role, and it was both of them are and were daddy's little girls, but right now, they're in difficult phases of life and don't always like what dad has to introduce.
Yeah, I'm in that role.
Yeah,
like I said, my ex-husband can do no wrong, and dad helps me. And I'm glad. I am so grateful, right? Like,
right.
So grateful. Hey, can you tell her so-and-so?
That's great.
Yeah, right. Good cop, bad cop kind of thing.
Yep.
So Dr. Dan, tell us a little bit about where you started, and tell us about Dr. Frankl and how he apparently impacted your life at some point in your world. And tell us a little bit about, your heart and soul you have a huge history in the addictions and mental health of adolescence and all of those pieces. So tell us, give me a short snap of your story.
Sure. I don't know how short I can be to try to cover 25 years, but I will.
Yeah, I know.
First of all, look, to you and your audience, my goodness, thank you. The first male guest. What an honor. As I said earlier, I'm going to put a plaque right behind me. First male guest. Thank you. I hope I hope to do justice to the podcast and to your audience. So,
you know what?
About me.
Awesome. You're great.
So
You're terrific.
I have been a psychotherapist and coach and organizational health consultant for about 25 years. So in that time, I've developed a lot of areas of expertise, and I've needed to develop areas of expertise. I started out in the adolescent addictions field. I left grad school, moved out of the college town we were living in to the metropolitan area of Indianapolis, and found this amazing program that had such a unique way of helping adolescents and involving the family. So fell in love with that, did my work there for a good, I don't know, 8-10 years. Eventually was running treatment centers in Indianapolis, Cincinnati, Detroit, and was moving into the Chicagoland area. When I realized the substance at that time in history, a horrible heroin problem. And I looked at my wife and I said, my goodness, how can we bring 2 babies into this environment and raise them and hope and pray that everything's going to be okay? I said, you know what, I don't want to risk it. So we went about 2 hours away from Chicago to an area where she is from, near the University of Notre Dame. I like to call it, my audience knows it as Farmville, Indiana. That's not the real name. But it's beautiful. We're surrounded by farms and corn and soybeans. I'm talking to you from a 150-year-old farmhouse, which many people seem to think sounds idyllic. I think it's just a new problem to fix every day. But we've certainly enjoyed raising our kids. It is. We've enjoyed raising our daughters here, and look forward to the next adventure in life. But my adventures on a daily basis are helping people in psychotherapy and coaching, and I love taking my experience and understanding of Dr. Frankl's logotherapy, the psychology of meaning, to organizations and groups to help people find a more meaningful existence, work life, family life, etc. You asked how I got started with logotherapy, Dr. Frankl. I just happened to be reading his most famous book, Man's Search for Meaning. Many people have heard of it. It's if you haven't read it yet, most people consider it to be fairly life-changing. It certainly changed my life, because I'm reading this and I said, of course I had read it in grad school years before, but it just hit me at the right time. Sometimes the right book, the right podcast, the right piece of information at the right time can definitely be impactful. And I said, I have to find out more. I have to dive deeper into this. And I did. And I found the amazing professor, Dr. Ann Graber, out of the St. Louis area. And she said, we have more studies that you can do in this. There's a school in Vienna, Austria. I said,
ooh,
sign me up.
Sign me up.
My wife said, absolutely not. Yeah, I know. I said, boy,
that whole marriage thing.
Right, responsibility. There's a school in Abilene, Texas, and of all places, there was one right up the road in little old Mishawaka, Indiana. I said, my goodness, what more sign do I need to start my studies in this? And so I began a doctorate in logotherapy and existential analysis. And much to many of my professors' frustrations, I think one of the most common things I said was, more people need to know about this. Every time I read something, every highlight, every underline, like, my goodness, more people need to know about this. And eventually they said, you need to stop saying that and do something about it. And so I did. And so, not only do I use it in my practices of coaching and psychotherapy, but I speak as much as I can on it. I have my own podcast, The Meaning Project, and I love speaking to amazing individuals like yourself about this topic.
That's so cool. So tell me, what makes logotherapy and the psychology of meaning different than your average, maybe like behavioral or some other form of therapy? What makes it different? Sure. What's the approach that's different? How do you look at things differently?
So we'll go into a little bit of history and then talk about the differences, right? So Dr. Frankl was a student of, everybody knows, Sigmund Freud. Right. He was a outgoing 17-year-old young man already formulating these ideas, and he would exchange with Freud regularly about his ideas. Freud believed man is a being in search of pleasure. His student Adler thought man is a being in search of power. And young Viktor Frankl comes along and says, no, I think man's a being in search of meaning, which ironically coincides with something the Greek philosopher Plato said about 2,500 years before.
Okay.
So as a young man, he starts to put these ideas together. He's writing, he's corresponding with Freud, and eventually goes on to, he was a prodigy and went to university early and became so many degrees, neurologist, psychiatrist, and he starts to put these ideas to work in Vienna, Austria, post World War I. Not a very nice place to be. If you remember your history, Austria did not win World War I.
No, they
were
not.
on the losing end. So a lot of poverty, a lot of sadness, a lot of poor economy, a lot of suicide during that time.
Interesting.
And he was able to, in the clinic he worked in, he was able to bring that suicide rate down to virtually zero through the use of his theories.
Wow.
Yeah.
I had no idea. No idea. I mean, I really didn't. And I know my audience doesn't know anything about it. Yeah. They're definitely tuned into my more cognitive behavioral techniques more than anything else.
Sure. So one of my favorite things he says about the difference between logotherapy and Freud's psychoanalysis, he said, in psychoanalysis with Freud, he said, the client, the patient lays on the couch and talks about his past. And Frankl says in logotherapy, the client sits in a chair and we make eye contact and we talk about their future. They don't have to lay on the couch. So that was his attempt at humor. It's pretty funny.
It is kind of funny, but I think it goes to so many things, like sitting in the past and depression and suicide and depression rate, right?
Yes. Logotherapy is very future oriented. We talk about setting goals. I love asking questions about 1 and 5 year plans, sometimes 1 day plans, right? What are you going to get through this week? And how to find meaning in a variety of areas. We have, in the theory is, there are 3 ways that we find meaning. We discover meaning in our lives. Excuse me. One is through our experiences, what we take from life, what we go out, it's experiencing a beautiful sunset, traveling, being in connection with wonderful people and having conversations. What we experience, what we take, is often an opportunity for meaning. But then there's also what we create, what we give to life in our work, in our volunteerism, in our creative hobbies, whether it's music or painting or creating works of art, or just creating things in our daily work. A lot of opportunity to discover meaning. And then finally, the big one is in our attitudes, especially our attitude towards suffering. I'm sure we know the human condition, whatever ancient wisdom text you read, life is suffering. Life has suffering. We cannot avoid suffering, but we get to choose how we relate to it and what our attitude is. And if we choose an attitude of trying to turn that suffering into accomplishment or achievement, we can often discover very powerful meaning in
that. That is a place that I go a lot with clients. When we're sitting here and my thrust in functional medicine is primarily changing health to change life. But when you walk down that road of emotional landmines of food, attitudes are tough to get through sometimes, right? And they feel like they're suffering when they give up gluten or dairy, or like it's palpable for them to feel that suffering.
When I talk to my clients about changing patterns of behavior and things like that, it is giving something up. But how about reframing it to what are we gaining there, right? What is the possible positive outcomes? Yes, you're giving up gluten, but what are you replacing it with? And can you develop a more enjoyable relationship with whatever that substance is?
I think that's the key, really, is really just being able to get into, it's a mental habit of reframe.
Right. Reframing. Yep. You're exactly right.
It's the mental habit of not staying in the victim space, right?
Yeah. That's choosing our attitude. But going back to the history of Frankl, right? So World War I, he's a practicing psychiatrist and neurologist. And then World War II comes, and being a man of Jewish heritage in Austria, when Hitler decides to cross the border, wasn't a good place to be. And this is one of my favorite stories. He had the opportunity to use an American visa to continue his studies over here, And yet he said, my place is with my family right now, with my elderly parents. And he chose to stay there knowing what might happen. And of course, he was in the Nazi concentration camps for 3 years as a result of it. Lost his entire family, his wife, his parents, his siblings, and spent 3 years. That's largely what Man's Search for Meaning is about. He wrote that in the first 2 weeks after liberation. He said, I have so much in my mind, I have to get it out. Yeah, it's such.
I didn't realize that he had a visa. You know, Bonhoeffer could have stayed here too, and he died in this very similar circumstances.
Yeah.
A choice to go back to Germany when he could have stayed here in the United States and become a famous preacher. He chose to go back and stand for the cause of Christianity during that same, because it wasn't just happening to the Jews, it was also happening to other people.
Right. We hear of many
and other religions.
heroic stories. Yeah, absolutely. Of religious people going back to try to help, to nurture people, and paying the ultimate price for it.
Yeah, that's very interesting. I'd never put that together till right now. So you said that there's 3 ways to discover meaning. Why do we need meaning?
So it's when, I guess I can reframe that into what happens when we have the absence of meaning, when we are not discovering meaning, when we feel life is meaningless. That's often a recipe for depression, anxiety, all kinds of mental health issues, emotional issues that cultivate into physical and certainly spiritual deficits as well, right? When we're not living, discovering meaning in life, it harms us, it hurts us. When we don't feel we have this drive, this thing pulling us forward, this task to accomplish, things to create, relationships to engage in, life becomes pretty meaningless. And that's, a meaningless life is full of sickness and ill health. And
how do you take somebody from, because that's a very victim place to be, right? So I'm going to just call it out the way it is. How do you take somebody from that very dark hole that they have spiraled into and get them to see how important it is to start to re-engage? Because they're comfy. They're comfy in a way, right? Like they're comfy because they don't have to take responsibility and they don't have to do anything, but they're uncomfortable because they don't like the way they feel. So how do you shift that? It's such a fine line between the discomfort of staying sick and the discomfort of breaking through that inertia, right? Like that need.
We look for whatever the most realistic possible step forward can be. In logotherapy. What is the baby step you need to take? What can you do to take responsibility for your life, your behavior, your health, just your day sometimes, right? Sometimes getting out and choosing to go for a walk rather than watching a little bit more TV, to get up and move, to clean, to organize, to do something small, to engage in life. In logotherapy, we talk about taking responsible action, right? So
I love that.
How can we get out of that comfort zone? And my job as a coach or psychotherapist is to help find that smallest next step that is going to produce the greatest possible good, that greatest reward, that somebody goes, oh, I did that little thing and it was amazing. Okay, great. What can we do next?
Great. You cleaned your cat box. Awesome.
Oh my goodness. If it's getting to that point that I need to intervene, we have a serious problem.
How do you feel like that plays into the role of self-trust?
Self-trust. Tell me more about that. When you say self-trust, what do you mean?
Because I think, so this is a conversation that I have a lot with people, is when we dive into self-sabotaging behavior, right? People they're going down the track and they've lost 10 or 15 pounds, they're 6 or 8 weeks and they're doing really good. And then something happens, and there's air quotes happening here. Something happens, right? A party, maybe even a real tragedy, right? Like somebody
Hmm.
dies
Hmm.
but sometimes it's just like a bump in the road. Like,
Hmm.
oh, well, I didn't plan my food this week, and so I just
Hmm.
kind of went off the rails, right?
Hmm.
And then it's a slippery slope from there. And so they slide down the slope and they don't want to call because they feel like I'm going to judge or whatever, right? Like we both get there, right? But they're just judging themselves. And so they just keep doing the exact other things that they know and choose
Hmm.
differently and choose other. And they spiral down into this place where now they believe that if they try, that they're going to just fail anyway, because they've tried
Hmm.
it so many times and they've
Hmm.
been on this path so many times that they just kind of like, they don't trust that they can actually do it. So that's why I say
Hmm.
about self trust, they
Hmm.
don't
Hmm.
trust themselves to take that they can actually take that next step, because what's the point? I'm just going to screw it up in 6 weeks anyway.
Of course, that's human nature to screw it up. um this is where my training in addictions comes in, right? So the
Yeah.
uh stages of change right in there is relapse. That's human nature. Of course we go back to old behavior, and one of the worst things we can do is allow that guilt to turn into shame to prevent us to go back. Guilt in my field, excuse me, guilt is a very positive and powerful emotion. If we allow that guilt to motivate us to change our behavior, to resume our plan, to get back on track, we've just turned that guilt into something wonderful. If we allow that guilt to fester, to sit in the darkness of it, to let it become shame, to prevent us from getting back on track, well, then we've truly failed, right? I love talking about failure. Failure is a very positive thing if you will let it be. Failure is the universe's way of saying, that did not work well for you. Try again. Try again. Correct your plan. Come up with a new one. Come up with something better. Or just get back on track with the plan you had, and it's going to be okay. Failure and guilt we can allow to become very positive and powerful things in our lives, or we can allow them to become shameful and take us back down.
Do you think that the messages and programs and value systems and that people grow up with make that their default, like guilt to shame?
Hmm. Oh,
Like,
yeah,
I
absolutely.
did bad, therefore I am bad.
Yes, and
I
that's
mean,
such a
we hear it so often, or I do, and I don't want to. I want you to take off here, but I hear it so often, like, "Oh, I was so bad this week. I
Mhm.
was bad this week."
Yes, I hear it
No,
all the
you
time.
made bad choices.
Yes, there you
You aren't
go.
bad, right?
Right.
But they grew up in an environment that's where I just hear it an awful lot, where it's such a quick,
Yeah.
they don't even know the difference. They don't
Right.
even
Well,
know that
and
they're
no.
saying it.
Yeah, they don't even see the thought pattern that I did something, unhealthy. I did something bad, so therefore I am bad. I think our culture supports that poor thinking as well, right? We see those messages all around us. If you do something wrong, you're a bad person. It's like, no, 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 no. You made a bad choice. If we go back to our statement earlier, if human beings are inherently good, sometimes we make poor choices and we need to learn from them. The only true failure is not learning and repeating the same mistake over and over and over again.
So this is really learning the habit of reframing. I mean, we've just
In
kind of
some
come
ways,
full circle on that,
yeah,
right? Like,
yeah.
when you fail and you feel bad about it, being in recognition of that,
Hmm.
and instead of going into the fridge and getting that second piece of key lime pie,
Mm.
um, I might be guilty. Um,
I've been there, but that's okay. Even after that second piece, we have the choice to
I
say,
know. And
that was
second, not to do a
delicious.
third one.
Exactly. That was amazing.
I
I'm going to go for a
need.
walk now.
I'm gonna go take Mango for a walk. Exactly.
Yeah. And that's okay. Again, that's not a failure. Maybe sometimes we choose to indulge. Key lime pie is delicious when done right.
God,
But
it's
right,
so
like,
good.
okay, then we need to take the dog for an extra lap. It's
Exactly.
not a failure. And I love what you said, that reframe. Yes, that's the fancy psychological term for simply saying choosing our attitude, right? Choosing
Right.
how we're going to look at the event, at ourselves, at life, right? We get to choose In logotherapy, we talk about the meaning of the moment and ultimate meaning. We get to choose the meaning of every moment. We are filled with opportunities throughout our day to choose. And if we choose meaningfully, if we choose healthy, it's better for us, and we live a more meaningful life with less guilt, less anguish and anxiety, and we feel better. But we're not always going to choose meaningfully. There are days where we're just going to choose to overindulge, to sit on the couch too long, to not do things. Okay, that's the human condition. Reframe, regroup, recalibrate, and do tomorrow differently.
Oh, that's so beautiful. I love that. Can you say more about creating? Like, we've talked a little bit about attitude. Talk a little bit more about creating meaning and discovering meaning. Like, because I also think that there's a habit in that too. Someplace in the deep inner workings and connectedness of our brain, you have to, like, you can just keep doing the same, like, I feed the dog every day, but is there meaning in feeding the dog? Like, right?
Absolutely, because what does that dog give back to you?
That in our moment? Go ahead.
Yeah. Well, of course there's meaning in that, because by feeding the dog truly loves you and is amazingly connected to you, right?
Right.
So first, let me clarify. We do not create meaning. Meaning exists in the world for us. We can see it as a gift from God, a force in the universe. Where meaning is there. It is an inherent force in the universe.
Oh,
but
I
we
think
discover it.
Ooh, talk more about that for a second before we go to creating.
Yeah, it's there, right? It is there to be discovered. It is out there in our day. It exists. Boy, right? It's tough to define, right? It is this ethereal force. If we go back to okay, so let's do a little bit of vocabulary here, right?
Yes, let's do that.
Meaning, logos, the Greek word, right? Where do we hear that? We hear that in the book of John, right? In the beginning was the logos, and the logo, it was the word of God. How do we define that? If great historians and theologians in time, they say meaning was with God and God was meaning. Okay. Chris, I'm not gonna be able to define that much better here on your podcast. It's gonna take me a couple decades of study.
That's amazing right there. No, I think that's it. Like, it's the Holy Spirit, it's the energy, it's like, it's been like, I think people try to, in different religions and different belief systems, they try to define it as something because it is so
hard
ethereal.
to define.
Yeah. It is something that exists, but you can't exactly put your finger on it.
Right. We know it is something that we usually know it when it's not there. Again, as I said earlier, when we live a meaningless existence, it hurts. We feel shallow, we feel depressed, we feel anxious, but we know when we're finding meaning, right? So that's Greek
true.
Root of the word is I was just reading that earlier this week. The Greek root is foundational, existent. It permeates us, right? Whereas purpose, on the other hand, comes from a different Greek word that comes from telos, which means like to behave, to act, to go do something. So often we talk about finding purpose in life, and purpose is our behavior, but meaning is that foundational thing we feel when we're
Purpose
living
is a verb.
purpose. Yes, exactly.
Meaning is a noun.
Yeah. So, okay, where was the heart of that question? I know there was some even more stuff to get to there.
No, what I was saying was, how do we create meaning? But so we needed to talk about, well, meaning isn't created, it's just there. How do we discover it then, or find it? How do we sift through the, maybe even the monotony of the day? Like, okay, making dinner again, feeding the dog, making the coffee, doing the boring things. How do we get to a habit of finding meaning in that? It's like finding gratitude in some of those things, and what the kind of the shift of gratitude and meaning.
Well, right there in your example, right? You can go about cooking dinner, the monotony, what we call the existential vacuum of this.
Oh my gosh, I love that.
Yes, and that's what it is. But there's a choice there, right? And I really simplify it for some of the people I work with. Like, look, you can sit there and say, "Ugh, I have to make dinner for these people again," or you can say, I get to make dinner for these people that are going to appreciate, and maybe they don't appreciate it, but at least they're going to put it in their face and gain nutrition, right? And that you
Fair.
get to nourish the human beings that surround you and ideally you love and enjoy engaging with, right? So it can either become a chore or it can become a blessing. It's your choice.
That's so true. That is so true. So creating meaning is really, again, it's a habit of being able to shift, reframe in the moment from, ugh, I have to do this thing. It's have to get to.
Yeah. Well, first of all, you're taking
To get to.
responsible action, right? You're taking responsible action in creating a meal, right? So that's meaningful if you want it to be. You can enjoy that time. I don't know about you. Come fall and football season every year, I get this giant pot out and start putting ingredients in that I don't even know what I'm putting in most of the time. But in the end, in a couple hours, it turns out to be chili. And
So good.
yes, especially in the fall, especially come football season, love a giant pot of chili that I share. My daughter takes some to college. I give some to my in-laws. But there's no way in the world I could eat this giant pot here with my wife, right? But to create that and to have people share with it if they want to come be a part of that, or at least just to have it later. It's very meaningful.
Right. Yeah. I love to cook most of the time. Sometimes it's just out of, no, really. I mean, most of the time, and I can just say that the times that I'm not really enjoying it is because I've chosen to be like, ugh.
Yeah.
You know, I've chosen to be eye roller. Okay, here we go. Another steak on the grill, whatever, get it done. Let's go. It just becomes kind of that very, okay, it's fuel. Let's go get it done.
Yeah. And that's okay sometimes. Sometimes we are just fueling our body and we need to make choices. You know, I know you talk a lot about nutrition. So great. If it's going to be mundane, then make the healthy fuel to put in your body and get done with it. Now, I don't know how a steak on the grill can ever be meaningless, but I mean, that is.
Oh, me either. I mean, I love my steak on the grill.
I tell you what, here's a secret I found in the past couple months. You can air fry steaks and they're amazing. Yes. Yes.
I just got an air fryer. Y'all, you all know that my peeps know I just got an air fryer, so I am learning the air fry thing. I did not know you could air fry a steak.
And quickly too, and they are just as good. I like to use a little bit of Greek seasoning and maybe a little bit of butter after you flip it. And in the time that you're air frying that steaks, I think it takes maybe 3 to 4 minutes per side. You can chop up some cucumber and tomato, a little bit of onion. You got a Greek salad, you got a Greek steak. It's amazing. Yeah.
All right. Dr. Dan does recipes too.
Yep. Didn't know it was going to turn into a cooking show, but here we go.
That would not surprise any of my people that we talk about food, because we talk about food a lot. Awesome. So we can go from the meaning of life into food, and food is not the meaning of life.
But it is an opportunity to discover meaning, right? So many
is.
As you were talking, I'm thinking, yeah, so right now I'm looking at several different menus. My wife said, hey, let's go grab a bite. I'm like, ooh, should we do barbecue? There's a new place with some brisket out there today. Woo-hoo! And is it just going to be you and I, or are we going to socialize with other people? There's meaning in connecting with other people, but then there's also the opportunity to say, let's leave the other people behind and maybe you and I just have a conversation for the first time in seems like weeks. So yeah, right. So plenty of opportunity to discover meaning in food or not. You know, I could just choose to shove that candy bar in my face and be done with it and not worry about, you know, a delicious brisket or pulled pork or something like that. And to skip the socializing.
Pulled pork and the brisket is going to be so much better than that Snickers bar all day long. Yeah. So we create it by shifting our attitude, by shifting our thought processes. Again, it's really about shifting that mindset.
It is. It's about choosing meaningfully. It's about first you have to choose to take responsible action, because rather than cooking that meal,
self-responsibility.
Right? Yeah, rather than cooking that meal, you could have chose to call up Grubhub and have somebody else make it for you. Right? Okay, that's fine.
Yep, it's true. That's a choice.
Not often going to be as healthy, and you're probably, you know, not getting up, walking around in the kitchen. Instead, you're sitting on the couch, not burning any calories. Right? So you have to choose responsibly. And when you do, you get to choose that attitude of, I'm going to enjoy this. Why would you cook something you don't enjoy cooking and be grumpy about it? That's a choice.
Yeah, I 100% agree. So you actually shifted the way you practice because of the way that Man's Search for Meaning hit you at some
Yes,
point.
absolutely,
Like categorically just turned it around. I mean, obviously all of our experiences become who we are, and God puts us here for his work, right? I know you and I are on the same page about that. Yeah. But to categorically change your career, I mean, that's okay. Some people would say, now I wouldn't, but some people would say that's pretty big risk. I mean, you were kind of deep in, 15 years in or so, and just to like turn it, that's kind of cool, I think. And
well, I mean, and this is,
that's a faith walk.
It totally, that's exactly where I was going to go. Again, when you're offered an opportunity to pursue a course of study you're interested in 10 miles down the road versus Vienna, Austria, I mean, what more sign do you need?
Right.
But I think, when I read Man's Search for Meaning, it called to me because it was already in me, right? There was something there. I must have been searching, but it also fit with what I believed in the treatment of addictions, in psychotherapy, in individual and group coaching. There was a connection there. I just needed to know more. I needed to uncover that anchor in myself to realize, wow, this resonates with me. And the deeper I studied, the more I got in. I mean, here's just some of the books from, my doctorate studies, right? Pages upon pages. And never once do I recall being bored or thinking like, oh, this doesn't make sense. Like, it just called to me. I mean, this was several years, 3-4 years, raising kids, having a practice and a family and dogs and a 150-year-old farmhouse. I got up at 5 a.m. I am not a 5 a.m. person. I got up at 5 a.m. every day to do my studies because it called to me. I had to. I couldn't stop.
Compelled.
Well, and what we talk about in logotherapy is, logotherapy was the first psychotherapy to recognize humankind has a spiritual component. And that also
I did not know that.
And so, we recognize that there are forces in the universe, God, that has a plan for us. And when we start to uncover that plan, again, we're compelled to continue. When we know we're on the right track, well, it's meaning, right? It calls to us, it compels us, it pulls us forward.
It absolutely does. I probably would not be sitting here talking to you if I had not been so compelled,
right,
to put my message out.
Well, and look at that series of compulsions that brought us together, right? I was compelled to do more podcasting after taking a break off. So what did I do? I just put a little question on our speakers coaching forum, and you jumped on that, and I said, you seem pretty interesting. Let's chat, right? This call in the, you and I, you're, I don't know, 1,000 miles away. We should not be connected.
No, I'm just in Tennessee. I'm
just in Tennessee,
probably 300 miles away.
Okay, there we go.
But whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it doesn't matter anymore either, right? After you, I'm talking to somebody in France.
Awesome. That's cool.
I know. To be in her summit. It's a thing. Anyway, yeah, I mean, I love that the world has gotten so small, and that we can really impact more people that way. So I love this spiritual component. Say more about that, along with how you pull faith, and do you pull your faith into your practice? I know that's something that I've really been experiencing a lot more of, and having more faith-filled conversations with clients when they're open to it. But say more about that, and how we can find that thing, that compelling piece, and how we know that it's the Holy Spirit versus our own stuff. And go ahead.
Talk more about that. So the belief of logotherapy is that human beings are made up of mind, body, and spirit. And then when we don't recognize that spiritual component, we reduce mankind down to animals, right? So we have this component in us, this consciousness, this recognition of something greater than ourselves, this spirituality that we need to act upon, that we need to nourish, that we need to cultivate, whatever way we do it. Now, we call that cultivation of a spiritual life religion, right? It is a system by which we recognize our spirituality, by which we commune with the divine. And when we do that, even hardcore psychological scientific research will tell you people with a rich spiritual life are by far happier and healthier than those without.
Oh yeah, I've been reading a lot about that. People who have faith and are married, like those people are going to live forever. They're going to be happier. They're going to be healthier physically. Like it's amazing. Like that whole relationship piece that pulls into that. I think that's very interesting that what you just said about like it's mind, body, spirit, and all of my people know that I'm all about that. But I think it's interesting that we know it's there, and yet I do think that a lot of people ignore it.
Yeah, that's what keeps people like you and I in business. Right? Let's be honest about it. If more people would recognize that, we'd be out of business. But unfortunately, or fortunately, and this is where my faith comes in, I think we always need to be growing, and especially as professionals trying to help others, we need to be doing our own journey, reading, 100%. Writing, seeking. And so, last year, have you ever read the Bible?
Me? Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah, many times.
Cover to cover.
See, probably not cover to cover, but within all the studies I've done, probably 3/4 of it.
That's amazing. All up until last year in my entire life, I had probably started a dozen times and always got hooked up at usually Numbers. It was Leviticus or Deuteronomy, right? I'm like, oh Numbers. My God, I can't keep going. This is right. I'd read the New Testament plenty of times, but I could not get through that Old Testament. So I'm like, I got to do this. I found a Bible in a Year podcast. It broke it down 20, 30 minutes a day, all kinds of different parts. But what was important for me was having somebody say, okay, check it out. Here's why all of this begatting is important.
Yes, right? It's so important.
10 pages of begatting. It's like, here's why. I'm like, oh my gosh, thank you so much for telling me. And all the rules and laws. But I recognized, again, it was the Bible in a year from January to March. By March, I was depressed. I was deep in that existential vacuum. I'm like, my God, this book is so bad. Everybody's bad and making poor decisions, and people can't get their act straight, and they're being smited and beat down. I'm like, this is horrible.
It's true.
So I had a good conversation with a spiritual advisor. I said, look, I can't do this. He goes, check it out. It's going to be okay. Remember, we have to read the first 2/3 to get to that last third. That last third is really good. That whole New Testament and all the good news, right? There's a reason for that. He's like, because the beginning was so bad and people were making so many poor decisions. I'm like, okay, all right, I can go. I said, so it's going to get better. He says, I promise you, it's going to get better. It's all right. When? He said, maybe October. Said, oh, come on. I got to go 6 more months. Fortunately, this reading plan incorporated, a little bit of the good with the old smiting and bad. But, that was one of the things that process helped me to come to this realization that humankind is made up of a lot of messed up individuals. We're not always great at making good decisions, right?
I absolutely love the Israelites.
Absolutely, right? They were so wicked sometimes. They made such poor decisions. And that gives us, right? Like if you're feeling really down on yourself, if you've allowed guilt to turn into shame, look at some of the stupid stuff they did back then.
100%.
We come from a history of people making poor decisions. But what's in store for us if we can turn that around? If we nourish that spiritual life, if we nourish a sense of religion, a relationship with God, a relationship with the divine, we can turn all that around for ourselves, our family, our community, our world. It can be really powerful.
Preach. Love it. It's so true. Yeah. I absolutely love the Old Testament and the Torah, which are the first 5 books. It's so rich with what you just said about how God has just this unlimited amount of forgiveness for us and grace to us, even before grace. was born, right? And we're in the Christmas season right now, so it's kind of, for me, it's a little bit top of mind, for sure. Do you think, I kind of know what your answer is going to be, but I'm going to ask it because I think my listeners are going to want to hear this, but the stress that we create, because I think we do create a lot of our own stressors, is also part of that existential need for meaning. Do you think that when we sit, let me make this a little more clear. When we sit in these patterns of negativity and we create our stresses, maybe we haven't forgiven somebody that we live with. That was, I'll just be honest and straight up. I needed to do some forgiveness work with my mom, who has dementia, and she's lived with me for 3 years, but there was a lot of anger and there was some bitterness and stuff. And I actually, and my listeners know a lot of what's going on in my life, so they know that I've worked through a lot of that, even just recently, like in the last 6 or 8 weeks. But I was creating an awful lot of stress for myself. Yes. That was making me sick.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. That stress will, that stress, any kind of stress, I just want to hear it from your perspective. Absolutely. When we're living in stress, whether it's simply mental, emotional stress, it becomes physical. Our brain will continue to release stress hormone way after the stressor is gone. And we've created some of the most stressed out times in history. We need stress. We need stress to motivate us to act, to behave. Good stress will help us in positive ways, but then there's also negative stress too. When we subject ourselves to that negative stress for so long, it begins to break down our bodies, right? So it goes from being mental and emotional and spiritual to eventually it becomes physical. It impacts our work lives, our relationships. Absolutely.
Yeah,
but we can choose differently.
Oh, we can totally choose differently, and we can choose to forgive and let our pride go and our need to be right, which drives so much behavior.
Yes. One of my favorite statements when I do couples work, which I'm steadily decreasing from because that's some hard work, right? But
that's hard work.
Very often one of the things I'll ask is, hey, do you want to be right or do you want to be married?
Yeah. Do you want to be right or do you want to be loved?
Exactly. Yes, that's so true. We can't be right all the time. And sometimes right just means compromising, finding a win-win situation, finding what's good for everybody.
Yeah, I think that's true. And I think this whole ignoring the spiritual stress that we create by ignoring the spiritual part of our life creates so much illness. Absolutely. I think it's a root for cancer. I think it's a root for autoimmune disorder, particularly. I see it a lot in women who have lived kind of this almost abused space, in this abused space in marriages where they're not valued, or they don't value themselves enough to stand up for themselves, or they're just in the space where I was for so many years, just never good enough for yourself, never good enough for anybody, not ever, can't do enough, can't be enough, can't get enough validation to ever fill that space until you really understand that only God can fill that space.
Beautiful. Yeah, I believe we are just in the beginning of trying to understand that better. Just in recent generations, are we? I mean, come on. In human history, women were just given the right to vote in the United States maybe 100 years ago. I mean, how horrible, but how beautiful. Right? What's that?
Right. It's true. Yeah, it's true.
I mean, we're living through some amazing times. I can't believe, going back to the biblical studies, right? Humankind's been messed up for a very long time. We just get to live in a cool time where we're starting to recognize we can do something different about it because of our connectivity, because we get to have these conversations and exchanging ideas like that. We get to see these impacts. It's sad that it's taken this long, but it's also beautiful that it is happening.
I love that. And I think, the whole women's shifting, I don't think that they give credence to some of those things. Like, we just take it for granted that we vote, but it's only been 100 years and that's only a few generations away. And, you know, it was in the, I believe it was in the 70s before we could even apply for our own credit card. Like, that was in my lifetime. Maybe it was
It's
60s, but
unbelievable.
still,
I can't
like, we
imagine.
couldn't have our own credit card. So, and then
Yes.
we wonder why we kind of aren't always good with money or don't always understand how some of those things work, because
Right.
our parents didn't know.
Exactly.
Our mom didn't know.
We still live in a time, and I don't remember if I shared this story with you previously. It's a horrifying story, so I'm going to apologize to your audience already. This
No, it's
is
good.
a reason I
Smack
was
you
called in.
guys.
What's that?
We'll smack them a
Yeah,
little.
well, we need to. It's I was actually called in just last Friday to do some organizational work in a culture where, and I couldn't believe this, the typifying statement that I was horrified by, that recognized that this culture needed a some organizational help, was a gentleman spilled his coffee on the carpet, didn't do anything about it, and he said, my secretary will take care of that, and moved on to whatever meeting he was going to, and actually joked with other gentlemen in the next meeting that that was going to happen. Like, okay, I'm in. I will be there in 5. Like, I put on my superhero cape and my guy, and I'm like, yeah, I'm in. I'm gonna go smack somebody. Right. It's going to
Oh
be a
my goodness.
long-term process.
It's
That is a horrible attitude that takes a long time to shift.
it's so, like, how is that still a thing? I mean, we watch,
Mhm.
okay, we watch James Bond movies and we watch, you know, Money Penny do everything behind the scenes, right? And yet,
That's so true.
and yet, this is still a very pervasive attitude, but
Mhm.
it's not, it's, and sometimes it's more subtle. I mean, that's kind of blatant, like, she'll get it.
Yeah.
My
Yeah.
secretary, you know, not my assistant, not my executive right arm, whatever, you know, with just the secretary,
Mhm.
um, which is, you know, it's like flight attendant, stewardess, right? Like, there's just certain words that we just don't use anymore.
Right. Right. Right.
um, and my kids will call me out sometimes, like, oh, didn't even know, but like, it's still so pervasive though. I mean, even when I was
Mhm.
in school, the male dominated, like, there were, I don't know, it was, I had a small class, maybe there were 10 girls to 30, to in a class of 30.
Mhm.
Like, we were very much the minority, and we definitely, I know I wasn't um making it up that I had to work harder
Sure. I yeah, absolutely. Now,
in
personally,
professional
I
school.
can't
And
quite relate to that being in a counseling psychology program. I was only one of 2 males in the entire program. So
so it goes the other
we
way.
need more men out there doing that. So,
I
and I
agree.
joke about this, right? I really, when working in a couple situation or in groups, like, I had, as a man, I can take responsibility for this. I had to go to school for 2 years to understand feelings, to learn how to validate people, right? And that's something I have to teach many men. Like, okay, here's how you validate an emotion, right? Stop trying to solve people's problems. Stop trying to solve problems because, we want to be fixers, and just validate. And
That's beautiful.
yeah.
And honestly, I think that I have some women in my audience, and I am included in that.
Mhm.
Um, that I definitely put my feelings aside for many years. They weren't
Mm.
validated as a kid,
Mhm.
first of all, and second of all, it didn't always um, serve me to have my feelings out on my sleeve
Sure.
in a professional situation. And so we learn to shut down, but, you know, we start blunting the bad ones and we start blunting the top ones, and we end up very flat.
Mhm.
Um, and I have a very I birthed an empath, which is God's cruel joke. Um, kidding, I'm kidding. Um, but I've had to learn how to do just that. Like, stop trying to fix. There's
Yeah.
nothing wrong with her. she just needs me to say, oh, I hear you say that you're feeling sad.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Oh my goodness. If we could do more of that for our partners, our children, our coworkers, rather than saying, this is probably one of the least favorite thing for any one of us to hear, and probably the most common thing for us to say. Well, what you need to do is this, right? Like, no.
Let me
We
tell
can go
you.
ahead. Yeah. Like if we could just take that phrase out of all languages, and say exactly what you said. So what I hear you saying is, you're hurt, you're sad. Or, and this is what I teach men. All you have to do is say, how's that go? Oh, that sounds, insert feeling word here. You don't have to get it right. Just insert emotional language here. And the other person will say, oh, you got it. Or they'll say, no, silly, it was this. Okay, great. You've made a connection there somehow.
Oh my gosh. Say that again,
Mm-hmm.
because that was beautiful. And y'all need to rewind 15 or 20 seconds. That was awesome. Say that again.
Gee, Chris, it sounds like you felt excited. And then you wait for the
Yes.
reaction. And then and then Chris said,
excited.
you got it. Absolutely. Or if I say, gee, that sounds like you felt very sorrowful.
No, that's a really cool
Okay.
thing.
No, really? Okay. I didn't get it right. Tell me more. And this is how we build human connection, right? We disconnect
Oh
when
my
somebody says,
goodness.
well, here's how you do it. Here's what I would have done. Here's how you fix that, right? At the most common time, is talking about work life. When somebody comes to you and says, such a rough day. This other person, they just were really on my case, and it was kind of frustrating. And, well, what did you do to deserve that? What you should have done. I'm just like, no. You are wanting, you're lining up to get something thrown at you with those kinds of comments. But to try to understand, to validate somebody else's experience, it brings us closer together and connects us.
Oh my gosh. I think we are going to have to have an entire podcast about validating people's experiences and emotions, because this is a place where I think this is one of the things that I'm learning and learned and have learned and in process, because we all are, but it's a place where I'm talking to my teenagers, being more validating and less let me do this or let me help you with it. Being more validating has definitely brought us closer. And when I jump in, and my default is let me fix it.
Yeah.
I'm going to be honest. I'm a little bit on that side, partially the doctor side of me, but I don't want to see, nobody wants to see their kids hurt. Like a lot of parents are like that just naturally because they don't want to see their kids hurting. But I think if we can just validate and listen, and my daughter has been telling me this for so long, then we can make a different impact on them. And it doesn't have to be the eye roll and all of the animosity. And
Right.
I don't know. You're the professional here, but that's just in my experience. That's what I found.
Right. Well, and if we go back to what I was saying earlier, right? If failure, if relapse, if struggle, if suffering is part of the human condition, yes, as parents, we want to prevent our children from feeling that. But who the heck are we to take that away from them? Right? If we need suffering to become better, if struggle helps us improve, why would we take that from our children? It's because it's human nature as a parent, right? We don't want to see them sad or hurt or to fail, but sometimes we need to let them. That's what parenting is about, is trying to mitigate the failure so it doesn't devastate them or change their course in life, but so that they experience it and grow.
Suffering is growth, people. We say this so many times. And you know what? I think this is a beautiful place to kind of wrap up. I have thoroughly enjoyed our conversation.
It was wonderful. I had a wonderful time.
This was completely amazing. I just love your work. And I honestly didn't know that some of the places that I've gone or taken my own coaching style is a little bit of this. I just didn't know that that's what it was called. So thank you for giving it a little more meaning.
Oh, well, thank you.
But I absolutely have loved this. Do you have anything else that you'd like to kind of finish with, or? leave us with,
No.
validating feelings. And like, that was just such a beautiful way to wrap this whole thing up, because that's what ultimately we can help others find meaning in, that they take responsibility for their feelings and for their suffering and get better. And then there's more meaning in their own world.
Absolutely.
So
turn that struggle, turn that suffering into achievement, into accomplishment, and you will find unbelievable meaning in that.
Well, Dr. Dan Franz, you have been an absolute gift today, and it's been a pleasure speaking with you. Thanks, y'all. Love you so much. And I will see you on the flip side. Love y'all. Bye.